Multiple chemical sensitivities, or MCS, is a chronic condition where a person experiences severe symptoms from being exposed to chemicals or toxins that we find in our everyday environment, like cleaning products, laundry detergent, cigarette smoke, car exhaust, cologne, perfume, that sort of thing. I struggled with MCS for at least 8 years, and it is a powerless, debilitating, hopeless life living with chemical sensitivities. You create this environment in your home that is as clean as possible, as toxin-free and natural as possible, and then you're afraid to leave your home. Because when you leave that bubble that you've created, the odds are pretty good that you're going to encounter something that triggers your symptoms. So leaving the house is resigning yourself to suffering. I had to stay 2 aisles away from the laundry detergent aisle at the grocery store, or if someone came and sat down next to me wearing cologne or walked past me smoking a cigarette, I could be sick for days or longer. My mom had chemical sensitivities too. She had it before I did. And she died at the age of 59 from cirrhosis of the liver, which is when the liver fails, usually because of lifelong alcohol abuse or from chronic hepatitis. But neither of those situations applied to my mom. Her liver just simply couldn't process the toxins in her environment any longer. And in the last years of her life, I really watched her mental health and physical health deteriorate and decline, and it was a really hard thing to watch. She really had it worse than I did. She couldn't even enter an establishment that had a laundry detergent aisle. She was that sensitive. So she was truly housebound, as a lot of people with MCS are. For a long time, I was really in denial that I had chemical sensitivities too. What I watched my mom deal with was just so horrific. I couldn't accept that that was also my reality. But there came a time when I just couldn't deny it any longer. So after going through a whole slew of emotions, from fear to anger to depression and despair, I decided that I was going to figure this out. I decided that I was really fighting for both of us, for both the life that my mom didn't get to live and for the one that was still very much ahead of me. Western medicine really didn't have any answers for me, so I quickly turned to alternative therapies, and I tried a lot of them. And while many of them helped to mitigate some of my symptoms, none of them really solved the problem. None of them let me lead a normal life. In fact, the only real solutions that I was given was to avoid my triggers, to basically not leave the house. And even if I did that, I was still suffering. My nervous system was constantly activated. I was always in fight or flight. That became my new baseline. So if I reacted to something, I was just going up from there. So this life of barely surviving, of suffering, of constantly wanting to crawl out of my skin just wasn't good enough for me. You know, I wasn't cutting it. And I was convinced that there was still a better answer out there. And I refused to resign myself to just never being able to leave the house. And at the same time, I was getting weaker and less functional by the day. It was like my brain just wasn't working. And that made it even harder because I really needed my brain to work in order to figure out how to fix my brain. So at one point, I had some genetic testing done, and I discovered that I have genetic mutations in my MTHFR pathway, which basically means that your body's ability to detoxify is compromised. So I learned in my research that while chemical sensitivities might start out as a detox issue, when it gets more severe, like it did with me and to a greater extent with my mom, it really becomes a brain issue. It's a misfiring in the brain. It's not unlike an autoimmune disease. Your body is overreacting to a stressor or attacking itself unnecessarily. So when you're exposed to a chemical, especially in someone who has compromised detox pathways, your brain creates a stress response. It's basically saying, danger, this is toxic. And that's true, but it's not necessarily life-threatening. Over time, each time that your brain perceives a chemical, that stress response, that neural pathway to stress response, becomes more and more reinforced. And soon, your brain perceives chemicals as life-threatening. So think of it like walking across a big open grassy field. If you take the same route over and over, it creates a well-worn path. And then you're not likely to take any other path across the field because you've already created the easiest route. So the same thing is happening in your brain. That neural pathway to the stress response is becoming more and more sensitized until the tiniest whiff of a trigger can send your body into an extreme overreaction. Whatever that reaction might be, the symptoms can vary from person to person, but the barometer is if it's instigated by exposure to a chemical. So once I understood how chemical sensitivities works, I was able to target my research a little bit better, and I started looking more at brain-centric therapies. I tried a few before I found Neuro-Optimal, and Neuro-Optimal is a kind of neurofeedback that measures and reads the brain's activity and then reflects that back to you in the form of music. And when your brain hears and recognizes its own activity, it's able to self-correct. Now, why is that? Well, what we know about the brain is that it's incredibly self-organizing and it's incredibly efficient and it wants to be in its most optimal state. Its only roadblock is that it's blind to its own landscape. So in the same way that you can't see your ear without a mirror, your brain can also not see itself. So this technology really offers your brain that mirror of itself so that it can right itself. So when your brain is finally able to see all the neural pathways that it's created, it can say, oh, I see I made this association between chemicals and life-threatening danger, and that's not actually necessary, so I can stop that. And it really comes down to that. Your brain just needs to see itself to fix itself. Once I started learning about Neuro-Optimal and combining that with what I already knew about how chemical sensitivities works in the brain, I became really hopeful and optimistic that this could be a really powerful tool to help me. And even in the first few sessions, I started to notice a difference. I just was feeling better in general. But it was after the fourth session that something really profound happened. Now, I want to say that everybody responds differently, every brain is different, and some people respond very quickly, others take longer. So my experience is not an absolute, it's just one person's experience. That being said, after my fourth session, I went on a ski weekend in the mountains with my family. Now, this was very out of the ordinary for me because with chemical sensitivities, there's always that element of worry and fear whenever you travel or leave the house at all because you can't control your environment. And sure enough, I walked into the condo that we were staying at that day and I was enveloped in the smell of new paint and new carpet and all these new construction outgassing smells. And it turns out that they had just finished renovating this condo the day before. So I was pretty worried. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to make it through a day or a night, let alone the whole weekend. I went to bed that night, and about 2 hours later, I woke up in a full-blown attack. And I was really scared because I knew that with every moment that I continued to breathe this air, I was doing more damage to my body, to my health and well-being. And I was also really pissed. I was mad because I was stuck in this place of helplessness where I couldn't control what happened to me. And it was just a reminder that you can't leave your house. You can't go spend time with your family. You can't go on vacation. You can't live a normal life. You are a prisoner of sorts. So I'm lying there trying to figure out how I'm going to manage this situation. And about an hour into the attack, I noticed something interesting. All the physical sensation, all the reactivity, all the anxiety just drained out of my body, like water out of a bathtub. It just left. And I felt kind of fine. Like I felt calm, I felt relaxed, and I didn't even notice that I fell asleep until the sun shining through the window woke me up the next morning. And I got up and I was really surprised that I felt great. I felt normal. And I skied all day, which was a really big deal for my feeble body at that time. It was the most physical I'd been in a long time. And I was exhausted, but that was the last time that I ever reacted to a chemical. And now I don't think twice about leaving the house, and I don't avoid the laundry detergent aisle. I don't avoid anything. And after going through all that, and now being able to live a normal life and have that freedom is just indescribable. And it's something that I wish for anyone who's dealt with these kind of sensitivities. If you're struggling with chemical sensitivities, check out my website, lucidneurofeedback.com. I offer neurooptimal sessions in the Boulder, Denver area, so reach out and make an appointment today. And if you're not local, reach out anyway. I will get back to you, and I can connect you to my network of practitioners. And I look forward to helping you on your journey to optimum health.